Gainsight's product experience solution helps you understand how your customers are or aren't using your product, and proactively guide them to value with personalized engagements. Gainsight tracks every login, page visit, and click that a user can take in your product, enabling you to pinpoint where users are dropping off and identify the sticky features that drive retention, making it easier for your product team to build products your customers love. To learn more, please schedule your personalized demo today.
Thanks for tuning in to the Product-Led Festival. We really hope you're enjoying the summit so far, because we've got even more insights heading your way. All sessions are designed to be interactive and give you the chance to engage with our panelists, so come ready to get involved with your questions and comments. For all things PLG, don't forget to check on the PLA memberships at productledalliance.com. Sit back and enjoy the next session.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I am Vijay Rangarajan, and I'm excited to present this talk about making your product strategy count. I want to thank Product-Led Alliance first for giving me an opportunity to talk to you. I hope you find this talk useful and something you can apply as you build out products at your companies. I would have loved to talk in person, but given everything we've been going through over the last year and a half, we'll roll with a virtual show for now. First, a little bit about me. I work at Facebook and lead product for Facebook Business Suite. Facebook Business Suite is a solution that Facebook has built for small businesses to maximize the value they can get through marketing by reaching their customers across the Facebook family. Prior to Facebook, I was at Amazon, where I was part of a number of product initiatives, most notably Amazon Business and the Fire tablet line. And before that, I was in the semiconductor space working for companies like Intel and AMD. And that's a picture of my family, my wife, and 2 young boys. I live in the Bay Area in sunny California in the US. Let's now talk about what you should expect out of this presentation. There are many fundamental pieces of building a product that I have myself and many around me have found themselves not being super clear about. So a big takeaway that I want you to have is clarity around what a mission, vision, strategy, and goals are for a product. What makes for good strategy? What makes for good goals? All of these with some examples, of course. And then finally, it's not enough to have a great strategy. You have to put it to work and use data to know if your strategy is working or not. And if it's not, act quickly to change it. There's only so much that can be covered in a short period of time like this, but I'll do my best to land these crisply. I've built a number of products over the last several years. Some successful, many not successful. But as you know, we learn from our failures more than anything else. So let me tell you a story about a product I was trying to build back in the day. Of course, I'm extracting a bunch of specific product details out. Those aren't really important. But what's important are the concepts of the strategy and how you operationalize it. So I was part of a team that was trying to build a team collaboration product where people working together could communicate and collaborate with each other. Now, this sounds fairly obvious, right? Like we use Zoom, we use a bunch of other products that are out there. Now, this was a world before the pandemic and before Zoom was there. And this became like a must-have in our lives. So back then, we were still trying to solve for this problem. So we did everything that a good product team would do. We identified the market opportunity and verified that it existed. We created concepts and showed them to users who loved those concepts. And finally, we had the assets and the core competency, and we checked that we really could leverage those to actually build something that could be valuable for users. Then what? We set off to create a business plan with a beautiful vision. And boy, did we fall in love with that vision. And it was an awesome deck which showed the user journey and how users would love this product. And to go with that, we also wrote out our strategy, which was to differentiate in the market with an integrated productivity solution that didn't really exist at the time. We believed our product was unique in the market, and we rolled it out to a number of audience segments to see what would stick. Then what? Well, we built an MVP with a number of productivity features and shipped it to a bunch of people. And that's when things started to go downhill. The product didn't quite take off. We tried several different things, threw several different things at the wall, and eventually gave up. It wasn't quite clear why, but we knew for sure the product wasn't working. We were dismayed. The team was not in a great shape, knowing that something that they had poured their heart into was just not working. What we were offering was something fairly unique at the time, but despite that, it just wasn't landing. But wait, we had a vision and a strategy, right? That's what you need to really make a product successful. But you know what? A product fails for a variety of reasons. You have to time the market, you have to know how your competitors are playing, but more often than not, it fails due to reasons that are more in our control. Sometimes it's because the product isn't that good. That's an execution problem. But a lot of times you're missing the forest for the trees. You either have the wrong strategy and you don't know it, or you figure out too late that your strategy is wrong. And by that time, the market opportunity has just passed. So it's not enough to have a vision and a strategy. A lot of people can write those, but it's important to know how to execute on your strategy. If your strategy is indeed working or not, and knowing that, and knowing to pivot and cut your losses quickly. So that's what we'll dive into in the remaining part of this presentation. But first, let's start with some basics that I find people often conflate. And it's a very, very important to get really clear in your head about what these are. So let's start with the mission. Well, what is a mission statement? It is the end goal of your product. And typically, these are fairly pithy, concise statements that usually start with to be the, and it's followed by best, fastest, cheapest, most efficient, etc. Typically one of those, not all of those. A mission statement should be pretty audacious and often be impossible to achieve, but it serves to rally your team. It serves to rally your customer around the possibility of greatness. And it really embodies, the attribute of aiming high with your product. Then you have a vision. This is essentially the future state of the world in the long run. It's often the view of the world when you've achieved your mission. And typically, you describe this in terms of your user or your customer and how their world will transform because of the product or solution that you are building and bringing to market. And you want that vision to be so compelling that one would say, wow, really, that would be so cool. I really want that product now. So that's mission and vision. And then you have strategy, which is the path to achieve your product's vision. This is, of course, incredibly hard to get right off the bat. So you typically start with a strategy and keep learning with your product to evolve your strategy over time. Typical strategies that products use are differentiation. Like, my product is unique and innovative. Nothing like that exists. Cost. My product isn't too different. It does the job, but it saves you a bunch of money. It's probably still innovative, but it's been built in a way or marketed in a way that it's cost effective. Then you've got niche. Now, this isn't a broad-based product then. It serves a really niche and specialized audience segment really, really well. And then you have ecosystem plays. Of course, ecosystem plays start with one of the strategies above first, but really you start with a strength, you build some stickiness, build a slew of adjacencies to double down on that stickiness, such that customers turn to your product for a lot of things. And the product is then integral to their lives in so many different ways. Now, these are just few of the different strategies that products take. And many times, you start with one and switch over to the other based on how your product sticks in the market. And there are several others too outside of these, but a lot of the major strategies for product land into one of these categories. Now, let's zoom in a little bit on strategy. To actually figure out your strategy, you need a few things really clearly identified. Who the product is for, how it helps the users of the product, And why is it unique or different in doing so? So I talk to a bunch of people and they say, my strategy is subscriptions, or my strategy is a loyalty program. Those are not strategies, they are tactics. You need to get really crisp about these questions to even start defining your strategy. And then, whether you double down on the value you're creating through a subscription or through a loyalty program or by pricing up or any of that, those are levers and mechanisms to execute on your strategy. So let's be really clear on what makes for a really good strategy. And note that much of this, or whatever you write for a strategy, for a product starting off, is going to be just a set of hypotheses. It's a set of hypotheses that you have most conviction over based on the market research you've done, based on what you're hearing from your customers, that you then, by bringing your product to market, have to validate or invalidate along the way. All right. So that's what a good strategy contains. Now, let's talk about goals. So goals are measurable outcomes that help us understand how far you've progressed against your vision in a quantifiable manner. So you've got the vision, which is the end state that you're marching towards. Strategy is the path to get there. Goals are quantifiable milestones or check marks that you have to know that you're actually progressing against that vision. Now, let's also zoom into goals a little bit. Typical product goals should start with the user. So you need to develop a set of metrics that are centered around the value that you're creating. This depends on what your product does, but your product should be driving some outcome for the user that you should be able to measure. This could be a transaction, a task that the user accomplished, and a variety of other things. User goals center around measuring if you have created that user benefit. And this is not just the what, but also the how, which is where quality and sentiment come in. Like, you may be creating a bunch of user benefits, but people may not really like your product. So this is where you want to build a product that has a high bar in quality and people really love coming back to the product. Then you've got business goals. How does your product impact the broader business? And usually these come down to core business metrics that an organization cares about, like adoption, revenue, etc. It's important that you do these in order. That is, first define your users and then your business goals. I've seen many examples where these are done the opposite way, because you're like, okay, I want to drive revenue for my company. Okay, how do I do that? So that usually gets you into a pickle. You may have some short-term wins, but usually you want to start with the user value and then get to the business metrics, so that you don't lead to a situation where you've got poor outcomes because you optimize for something the business cares about, leaving the user behind. Now, what makes for good goal metrics? And there are good goal metrics and there are not so good goal metrics. Goals should be tangible. That is, you can feel and understand them and know them, like a sale, a task completion, dollars earned. These are tangible things you can understand, as opposed to, like, the cube root of the amount of time it took to go through a workflow. Not tangible, right? So you got to make sure your goal metric is really something that you can know and understand, and it's something that is a user can actually understand as well. The goal should be controllable. That is, you have the levers by which that goal can move. Typically, for example, it's hard to control revenue because revenue is an outcome of the product or the solution that you have brought to market. So typically, like, you can't directly go on revenue, but you can control the drivers of revenue by optimizing your funnel, maybe building new capabilities into your product, optimizing your go-to-market, like a bunch of different things that you can do and create value, which then translates into revenue. Then the metric should be testable. You should be able to run experiments with your product to know how the goals are moving depending on who and what you're testing. And this is where you can come in and say, okay, I think my product is going to work for this user base with these specific sets of features. And you should be able to test that. And depending on your scale, of course, can you do a proper A/B test or can you do other mechanisms? It doesn't matter, but there has to be some relationship between stuff that you're building and being able to know if your metric moves or not based on what you're building. And lastly, probably the most important one is if your goal is explainable. Can you talk to your team? Can you talk to your leadership? Can you talk to your customer? Explain the goal and inspire them about why it matters. All right, so now let's go back to our collaboration product example that I started this talk with. Let's look at the strategy statement. Does it make for a good strategy? Let's look at it. Differentiate with an integrated product solution for small teams to collaborate and become efficient. So we can make out who the product is for, small teams, why it matters to them, because it helps them collaborate and become efficient. And why is it different? Because it is integrated. Now, again, this is kind of a fictitious example, but back in the day, that was a pretty important value prop. And then you've got some good goal metrics as well. The user side metrics, successful meetings completed. That is what we wanted to achieve with the product. We wanted to elevate and transform the types of collaborations that small teams were having. And then you can use things like Net Promoter Score to know the sentiment behind your product. And then on the business side, what we were looking at was how many users are using the product on a weekly basis. And then if you have monetization tied to it, do they convert to premium users? Now, of course, know that these are slightly longer term metrics. These are the things that you want to track over long periods of time. You may not have a monetization strategy right off the bat, and that's typically not a great thing either. But it's useful to define the strategy and the goal metrics from a longer term perspective. Now, that's not enough though. Don't stop there. This is where how you operationalize your strategy comes into play. So I've myself done this and also seen this happen quite a lot, where teams just stop at having a strategy and goals. And arguably, the example that I shared right at the beginning was that we had a great vision, we had a strategy, boom, we shipped the product, and then who knows why it's not working. So no, that's actually where things begin. You have more work to do to actually translate that strategy into something operational to know if your strategy is right or not. So let's look at that. Once you have your high-level strategy and goals defined, I would create what's called a strategy map. Essentially, it's a table of steps that eventually realize the full potential of the opportunity that you're chasing. It's a well-informed, quantifiable articulation of how you will realize your vision. And typically, this would consist of the audience segments, the value prop for each, what hypothesis do you want to test, and the goals that you would set. To be clear, this is a set of hypotheses, so it's not known and proven, but it's the best guess of the sequencing that you want to create with your product. And it's this sequencing that suggests that if you were able to win step 1, then 2, and then 3, and so on, you have a great shot at winning with the product. So this is a methodical approach that I typically apply so that you're not spraying and praying. Now, as part of this, once you have that map, the most important piece is defining that first step that you take. The reason this first step is so important is because it is your best guess of what would give you the strongest signal if your product is finding fit with your audience or not. The first target audience is extremely crucial to define. These should be who you'd think are the obvious users of the product. Like when you conceived of the product, you're like, yeah, these set of people would love this product. These are the must-have users who you think the product is conceived for. And for this audience, you got to go and define the success measures, of course, after you articulate the hypothesis. So let's see this from the lens of an example. If we take our collaboration product example, here's how I would define the first step. The audience I'd pick is 50,000 small businesses who have 5 to 10 employees who do not use a professional collaboration tool. Now, why did I pick exactly that? That's where my market research would come into play, and that would suggest that I have an opportunity. Again, this is a hypothesis, but it should be your best hypothesis that's out there. And so with that audience, what I'm trying to test is, does the tool or the solution that I'm bringing to market replace the alternate options that they're using? Now, this could be a fragmented slew of options where maybe these businesses are using phone calls and documents and everything is all over the place, which we could conceivably replace with an all-in-one solution. And then I've defined success measures for these. And typically for this early of a test and a hypothesis, what you need is, are people actually adopting the product? And then are they actually using critical workflows within the product? And do they exhibit some stickiness and retention with those critical workflows? Now, you always have to make sure that these success measures ladder up to the broader goals you want to achieve. Typically, when you focus on the user value, which is these critical workflows I'm talking about, and some level of adoption, they typically will ladder up. Just make sure you're not focusing on something extremely narrow, which could still be good signal, but may not be a direct connection to your broader ambitions with your product. Then define your product. While you want to think big with your vision, your first product version needs to be small and really capture the crux of the value and innovation you want to drive. You don't need 15 features in your product. You need a few killer ones to test with your audience. The reason for this is you want a simple enough product to get signal if you're on the right path with your strategy or not. You don't want to build a whole vision out. Build just what's important to get users to go, wow, this is pretty cool. It's interesting. I wish I had this and 15 other features. Now, you may have built that small product, but you have to also remove all of the roadblocks that would prevent users from realizing its value. Typically, these come in two forms. You've made your core workflows or features just hard to discover and use. Like, for instance, login and setup. That takes a while. Your navigation is clumsy, etc. So make sure you're getting rid of these types of things. Then there's core quality. Is your app responsive and performant such that users don't have to worry about the product crashing all the time? It's only when you have an easy to discover product that is of high quality can you get the signal that you want about whether users are finding value with your first product or not. Now, let's look at this from the example again of the collaboration product. We define a very simple use case that was hypothesized as being valuable. Meet my team every week and take notes. That's it. Right? No raise hand, no this, no that. Like, I want to meet with my team every week and take some notes. What you need is easy setup. So, your acquisition cost and like the journey to actually get to your product becomes easier. You want high quality conferencing, note taking, and storage. And that's it. I would argue that's also a lot, but still it's a reasonable first product to go test with a contained audience. So then you take that audience, 50,000 SMBs that we talked about, and figure out how they use your product. And then the final piece is, what do you do as you have learnings along the way? And what do you do with the results? So this is critical, of course. If your test succeeds, great. Double down on this audience and scale. And then go back to your strategy map, check that row off, and move on to the next one. But if it fails, it's actually not all doom and gloom. Hey, you learned something. So you need to ask yourself a few questions. Is the product wrong for this audience? Maybe it was too complex. All they wanted was conferencing, or all they wanted was something very specific. Maybe the audience was wrong. The product was good, but we need to go up market. And many times you also find that there is no there. This product doesn't quite have a path to success in terms of the vision that you painted. Maybe your vision needs to be different. Maybe it needs to be smaller. Maybe your product is a niche product, and that's what you're learning. And does that matter to the business or not? That's for you to figure out. Or maybe it does not have the potential to be successful at all. Maybe like the research was suggesting that a need existed, but you may not be solving it the right way with your solution, in which case, cut your losses and move on. The reason I called this slide Strong Opinions Weakly Held, which is a quote from Jeff Bezos, is because I think As part of this evaluation of your test and strategy, what comes many times in the way is pride. Teams and product managers are so wedded to their vision and strategy that they really don't want to pivot. Of course, everyone wants to be right. Everyone believes so much in their vision and strategy, and you got to have that conviction. But you also have to take a step back at different points in time of that journey to know if things are working or not. So everyone wants to be right, but you're often right by first being wrong. So accept you're wrong and learn from it based on questioning your test, looking at the results, and seeing where you stand. So, of course, every product goes through the phases and challenges that I talked about. But the point I'm trying to make is this. If you are rigorous about operationalizing your strategy with a clear map of how you're going to execute, how you will measure success, and who your first audience is, you will get clarity about where you stand sooner rather than later. And that will help you make better decisions. So we covered a lot, and I want to quickly summarize the key takeaways. Knowing what a mission, vision, strategy, and goals are, very important. Don't conflate those in your head, and be clear up front and take the time it takes to actually define these very clearly. And always articulate them, socialize them, get your team to weigh in, get others to weigh in to make sure these are clear. Define quantifiable goals, first for the user and then your business. Write your strategy and goals, but that's not where the job ends. In fact, that's where it begins to build a map of how you will execute on your strategy. And that map typically consists of audience segments, hypotheses, and goals. Your first milestone or first step is extremely important. So spend the time to define your audience and hypothesis, and don't build the world for that test. Build just enough to know if your product is generating some user value for the cohort that you're going after. And finally, most important, based on what you learn, question everything about your product, your vision, your strategy, and pivot quickly if you need to. And many times it'll be just pivoting to a different segment, pivoting your product, pivoting your vision. But sometimes it's about cutting your losses and moving away as well. And sooner you know that, the better. So I hope you learned something about how to make your strategy count as part of this talk. Operationalizing your strategy is extremely important. And my big learning through a while of making products is you could have a great vision, you can have a great strategy. Don't just stop there. We spend a lot of time on those phases. Either we do that or we just go and build the product. There is this bridge in the middle that is so important, which will make sure that your strategy is actually robust and which will give you the lens that you need to know if your strategy is working or not. This is a topic that's super close to my heart. So I really love talking about this, and I appreciate your tuning in to listen to me. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope you enjoyed this talk.